Hello, Ernest here. You're watching a single shoe excerpt from our comprehensive 3-episode guide to super trainers. I'm noting this up front because you're going to hear me refer to other picks in this guide and other episodes in this guide over the course of this video. If you'd like to watch those full-length episodes, I've included links in the description below. For context, in episode 1, I offer a primer on what exactly a super trainer is, followed by pros and cons specifically for folks 50 and up. Then, in episode 2, I shine a light on our 4 top picks from across the super trainer category for runners over 50. And finally, in episode 3, I highlight 4 honorable mentions. Shoes that might not work for as broad an audience as our top picks, but could nonetheless be brilliant for runners with specific preferences or needs. Again, you'll find links to all 3 of those episodes in the description below. All right, with that setup out of the way, let's get to the single shoe excerpt from our guide to super trainers for runners over 50. That takes us to the R.A.D UFO, which retails for $200 US. Some folks spend their entire lives trying to prove the truth is out there, but it only takes one run in the UFO to recognize that the truth is in here. That said, you won't want to stop at just one run because out of all our picks, the R.A.D UFO delivers the most smiles per mile. Now, unless you're pretty well immersed into the world of athletic shoes, you probably haven't heard of R.A.D, which stands for Rally Against Destruction of the Mind, Body, and Planet. As company founder Ben Massey explained in an interview with Huckberry, the company's name is, quote, the internal mantra that drives us to challenge the status quo of what a footwear company can be, unquote. Massey, who is a former CrossFit athlete based out of the UK, founded the company in 2019 to create footwear that delivers best-in-class performance while recognizing that athletes today aren't just one-dimensional drones driven by a no pain, no gain, win-at-all-cost mentality. To help realize this vision, Massey recruited footwear industry veteran Tom Barron to lead design and innovation for the nascent brand. And together they launched R.A.D's first shoe, a CrossFit-focused trainer called the R.A.D 1 in 2022. By all accounts, that shoe was a huge success, and R.A.D leveraged their momentum in the training space to launch a running shoe line in late 2025, starting with the shoe we're highlighting here, the R.A.D UFO. As you might have gathered already, R.A.D isn't a company that believes in half measures, and the UFO is an incredibly audacious and successful first foray into performance running. My Goth Black colorway is the most conservative they offer, and I only went this way because I ordered my pair in winter, which is very rainy here in the Pacific Northwest. Now that we're in our sunny season, I'm awfully tempted to pick up another pair in one of R.A.D's fantastically bold colorways because they better reflect the shoe's joyful golden retriever energy. That energy starts with the UFO's weight, which at 8.8 ounces in a US Men's 9 qualifies as light. And that's particularly impressive given the size of the shoe's midsole. The UFO's heel stack height of 42 millimeters, while technically very high, is on the low side for a super trainer and is the second lowest amongst our picks. So the shoe isn't insanely tall, but one look from below and you'll see that its midsole is very broad. Given this width, you probably won't be surprised to learn that the UFO provides a reassuring degree of stability. So even with its very high heel stack and soft and springy cushioning, I think the R.A.D UFO is among the best super trainers available today for runners who crave a plush ride and want to minimize fall risk. When it comes to attributes that can mitigate our loss of elasticity at the Achilles, the UFO features a moderate 8mm heel ball offset, which has become something of a de facto standard in the super trainer space. Now, that is a bit lower than the 10mm offset that most conventional daily trainers are built on, and in theory, a lower offset could increase strain at the Achilles. But thanks to the overall architecture of the UFO's midsole, I believe most runners will actually experience reduced loading at the Achilles and calf. One key factor here is the UFO's aggressive, full-length rocker geometry. Much like the Dynafish Xiaoyan, The rocker built into the UFO's midsole allows you to literally roll all the way from initial contact on through toe off, limiting the amount of work your Achilles and calf have to do to lift your heel and propel your body forward. A related attribute that contributes to this effect is the stiffness of the UFO's midsole under the ball of the foot. This comes in part from the sheer volume of foam under your forefoot, but that inherent stiffness is amplified by the midsole's dual layer construction. The demarcation between the two layers is not obvious, but if I shift it in the light, I think you'll be able to make out the dividing line that runs along the length of the shoe. Both layers are made of the same truly high-performance superfoam, but the top layer that sits right under your foot is tuned to be a bit softer, while the bottom layer is tuned to be a bit firmer. This contributes to that stability I highlighted a minute ago and helps to amplify the stiffness of the forefoot rocker. The net effect of all this, the stack, the geometry, the two layers of superfoam, is a ride that feels effortless, like you could just keep turning your legs over forever. Now, there's one last thing I want to touch on in terms of ride. While the midsole features a convex curve when viewed in profile, it also incorporates a concave curve under the heel. At Nike, we used to call this sort of void under the heel a center of pressure concavity. And the intent is to use the shape of the midsole itself is to amplify both cushioning and support. As you load the rear foot at initial contact, this concavity deflects, soaking up some of the force of impact directly under your heel. At the same time, the sides of the concavity, because they don't deflect as much as the center, cradle and stabilize your heel through the transition from initial contact into mid-stance. This concave rocker across the heel is another feature that contributes to the reassuring degree of stability I mentioned earlier. Even though the R.A.D UFO doesn't include any traditional motion control components, the combination of its wide base, including across the midfoot, the center of pressure concavity, and the shoe's full contact geometry under the arch, provides a naturally supportive feel, and I believe makes it a good match for runners across the spectrum of foot strike patterns. On this topic, I think it's worth noting that I have a wonky gait that's rooted, I believe, in a leg length discrepancy, where my left leg is moderately longer than my right. As a consequence, the arch of my left foot completely collapses through mid-stance, and that foot continues to pronate through propulsion, which is a condition called late-stage overpronation. Conversely, my right foot lands in a highly inverted position and tends to underpronate. In other words, it doesn't roll in enough, and I end up staying on the outer edge of that foot through propulsion. Now, because I've had this leg length discrepancy my entire life, my body has adapted to it. But these opposing idiosyncrasies in my feet do make each side of my body susceptible to different sorts of injuries, if my shoes exaggerate those quirks. For example, a shoe that exaggerates my left foot's tendency toward late-stage overpronation invariably leads to pain along the inside of my left ankle, a condition known as posterior tibial tendinopathy. On the flip side, a shoe that exaggerates my right foot's tendency toward underpronation invariably leads to pain along the outside of my knee or hip, a condition known as IT band syndrome. While I'd certainly rather not have these issues, it is a useful thing for a shoe reviewer to have a built-in gauge for detecting footwear that promotes both over and underpronation. Okay, so what does this have to do with the R.A.D UFO? Well, I've worn the UFO across 7 runs, totaling 50 miles, and that included one long run of 17 miles. If I hadn't done that long run, I wouldn't have gone off on this tangent about my wonky gait, because the UFO was an unequivocal joy for the 6 other runs, and for nearly 90% of that 17-miler. But during that long run, at a bit past the 15-mile mark, I began to feel pain along the outside of my right hip, the sort of pain characteristic of IT band syndrome. And it just continued to get worse with each stride. Fortunately, I was able to finish the run, but my right hip remained very sore for the next couple of days. In a nutshell, the UFO did a great job keeping my left foot's tendency toward late stage overpronation in check, but couldn't quite do the same for my right foot's tendency to underpronate. So the bottom line is, the R.A.D UFO may not be the super trainer for you if you have a history of IT band issues. I want to emphasize, though, that I only experienced my hip pain when I ran in excess of 15 miles. My second longest run in the UFO was an 8-miler, and my body felt phenomenal for the duration of that run. So this may only be an issue if you regularly run in excess of, say, 13 or so miles. All right, so that's R.A.D. What about fit in our changing feet as runners over 50? Well, like all of our other picks, the UFO is only offered in medium, but I would describe it as a very accommodating medium, thanks to the shoe's highly compliant, unstructured upper. As I mentioned earlier, my feet measure as 2E in width, and I found the UFO supremely comfortable. Still, I wouldn't recommend it to folks with moderate to severe bunions, as I don't think the upper will provide you with enough volume across the forefoot. As for those with big toe stiffness, I'd offer an equivocal recommendation. The inflexibility of the UFO's midsole under the ball of the foot is going to be a big plus for you, but the width of the upper may be problematic if you're sensitive to pressure along the side of your big toe. Unfortunately, this is the sort of thing you can really only judge for yourself. Speaking of toes, the UFO's toe box does get a bit shallow, but again, thanks to the unstructured nature of the upper, this caused me zero discomfort, and I have tall toes. If anything, I think folks with very narrow feet may have the toughest time finding a good fit, because the UFO's narrow U-throat opening and very closely set eye stays limit the degree to which you can cinch down its upper if it's too voluminous for you. Finally, in terms of orthotics, I measured the UFO's sock liner at 5 millimeters thick, which is right about average, and that translates to average orthotic accommodation. Now, I'm going to wrap up this review with a discussion on value. At an MSRP of $200 US, the R.A.D UFO is in that zone where I think a lot of people may wonder, can this shoe possibly be worth it? Back when the UFO was first released in October of last year, the answer for me at least would have been a lot easier. At that point, $200 was the going rate for super trainers, and the UFO offered a unique ride paired with a unique aesthetic. It was also the product of an up-and-coming brand that was bringing a sort of punk rock energy to running that I found really refreshing. So back then, I would have said, yes, the UFO is absolutely worth its $200 asking price. But today, with the phenomenal Kip Run Kipstorm Tempo selling for $170 US, and the wickedly fun Dynafish Xiaoyan available for the industry-shaking price of $130 US, the value proposition for the R.A.D UFO has become less obvious. I do believe, however, that there are still runners who will see the UFO as the most compelling option amongst their picks. For example, compared to the relatively firm and propulsive Kipstorm Tempo, the UFO is the better choice if you prefer a softer, more flowing ride. As for the Xiaoyan, though the shoes appear quite different, their ride experiences are actually surprisingly comparable. As you can see, both feature aggressive full-length rockers, both are thicker under the midfoot than the heel, and both give you the sense that you could just keep going forever. And yet, I believe most bigger runners will feel more secure in and generally prefer the UFO because its upper and midsole are more robust than the Xiaoyans. Now, this last point is entirely subjective, but to me, the UFO also looks and feels like a more wholly considered, artfully crafted product. There are aspects of the Xiaoyan and, for that matter, the Kip Run Kipstorm Tempo that show signs of what's been known in the industry as cost engineering. I don't get that from the UFO. Instead, my impression is that the brief for this shoe didn't start with a price. It started with a vision, and the end product costs what it needed to cost. Ultimately, whether these intangibles are enough to justify the UFO's price premium is up to you. But as a lover of great products, I'm really glad the UFO exists. It's proof not only that intelligent life exists in the running shoe universe, but that passionate, irreverent, poetry-spewing life exists as well. I hope this excerpt from our comprehensive guide to super trainers has been helpful for you. And as I mentioned at the start, you'll find links to the full-length episodes that this excerpt was pulled from in the description below. Now, if you have found this video helpful, I hope you'll give it a like and share it with a friend. And please don't be shy about posting questions or feedback in the comments. That's a great way for us to learn together. Finally, if you want to see more from us, please do subscribe. Or better yet, join our community of like-minded people over 50 who are becoming runners over 50 over on Patreon. In addition to ad-free videos, Patreon members get access to our shoe report cards. That includes report cards for our Super Trainer top picks, as well as our honorable mentions, all as downloadable PDFs. You'll find our Patreon link below as well. All right, thank you so much for watching, and happy running.